Like the United Kingdom, the Republic of Ireland has its own television magazine to go with its own television corporation. Built upon the notions of a nascent corporation set to capture the television market between the coming of Tonga Haiti and the arrival of the Princess Cruiser in 1961, Ireland relies on a magazine. A magazine where, upon the arrival of its double issue, is the centre of many people's choices for their Christmas entertainment. Christmas in Ireland, just as in Christmas, without the Princess Cruiser, the sign of the upcoming holiday. The RTE Guide. The RTE Guide is a lot younger than the Radio Times and a little younger than the TV Times. Its first issue was published on December 1st, 1961 as the RTV Guide. Yeah, you're probably thinking, hey RandomMe, wasn't the magazine supposed to be called RTE Guide, you way on? In fact, here's a quick history lesson. Once upon a time in 1960, the Irish radio network was corporatised and became Radio Eireann, with the goal being to set up a television service, a separate Telifis Eireann. The broadcaster was renamed Radio Telifis Eireann in 1966. And anyway, the first few issues of the RTV Guide, because Radio Eireann Guide would have been a complicated name that wouldn't catch on, had an inauspicious start, as at the time the first issue came out, the television service wasn't actually ready. It actually launched on New Year's Eve, 1961. Urban legend says that the service was set to start on Christmas Eve, but they decided to take a week off for Christmas. Awful decision. They did manage to include some television listings in the first issue, but they were for BBC Television Northern Ireland. UTV existed by now, but was excluded on the grounds of being commercial competition. They had their own magazine. It's okay. In the dawn of commercial television in the vicinity of Ireland, there was a smorgasbord of companies to pick from in the eastern half of the Republic, provided that your antenna was strong enough to receive them. In fact, there is a word that defines the history of Irish TV, then it has to be overspill. First you had Granada, which had a shadow audience in Dublin in the late 1950s, later Ulster, later Harlech, or TWW/Tele de Cymru, as was before 1968, as they tried to captivate the potential eyeballs across much of Ireland. And the radio listings consisted of RE, 3 BBC networks, Luxy, and the American Forces Network. And this leads us to the first Christmas cover of the RTV Guide, as it was then called, the fourth issue of all time. Merry Christmas and Happy Viewing in 1962, said the cover, in anticipation of viewing becoming an option. But in fact, it was actually giving a good prospect for the year ahead. This year's cover stars were Maureen Potter and Eugene Lambert, posing close to his puppet character Finnegan. Eugene was, or was about to become, the father of Irish children's programming, and RTE was keen on tapping that market. 1962 was more like it, as it was the first Christmas touched by the Telifis. A nativity scene done in the style of the Radio Times Christmas covers of yore. You probably noticed that from this year on, St. Bridget's Cross had rotated a little to the left. I don't have covers from every year, so let's just skip straight to 1964. That year we had a mistletoe-bound couple, don't know who they are because my knowledge of Irish TV is rather meagre, announcing whatever features the Telifis had for the season. You might have noticed that the masthead was now emulating the Radio Times covers of the time a lot more. The magazine was given another redesign in 1965, and for the first and only time in its history under this name, got a new logo. This year's cover star was Uncle Gabo himself, Gay Byrne, who was with the Telifis since a few weeks past its inception, hosting the Late Late Show, and at this time of year, a Christmas offshoot set for the big day, the Late Late Breakfast Show. the toy show didn't exist for another decade, and mind, that show, the toy show, was often seen in the run-up for the holiday shopping season. 1966 saw the rename of Radio Eireann to what is now Radio Telifis Eireann, and a new logo was unveiled by the corporation, perhaps inspired too much by the BBC's decades-long reliance on blocks. St. Bridget's cross in the new design was made up of thin triangles, thinner even than the thinnest slices of cheese. It's pretty obvious that this iteration of the SBC was made an integral part of the RTE Guide's logo for the next 5 or so years. Except at Christmas, the only Christmas guides I was able to retrieve online were from 1966 and 1968, and used custom mastheads instead. For 1966, we seem to have the Riordans, or whatever they are, whereas Christmas 1968 was a huge spoiler listing literally every big-name signing RTE's one-channel television service got to air at Christmas, featuring every font imaginable at the time. I don't know when exactly the RTE Guide rebranded, or the corporation for that matter. I mean, in 1970 they were still using the old logo and masthead at the time of the World Cup. By then it was already in colour because Ireland had finally come to the conclusion that colour was now a viable option for them. Fair enough. The lack of any Christmas cover from that year seems to make up for the lack of evidence regarding the dual rebrand. Ireland had just won Eurovision for the first time. As it turns out, they had to merge St. Bridget's cross to the wordmark in the painstakingly then fashionable method of triple striping it. Certainly, the rebrand was part of the costly operation RTE had in 1971 to host the contest in Ireland for the first time. This also led to the RTE Guide rebranding, initially continuing the double-boxed masthead format influenced largely by the Radio Times and effectively giving the guide the traditional colours of red and yellow. I mean, technically it was already there at the time of the Mexico World Cup, the first. There were 2 World Cups in Mexico. The masthead changed a few years later, probably less, because they were moving away from the initial broadsheet-esque format in favour of tabloid, just like the Radio Times. That change took place in January 1977. Unfortunately, as I said before, I don't have covers from every year. There's someone on Facebook who clearly remembers that 1973's cover featured Wanderly Wagon, the puppet show with the aforementioned Eugene Lambert. So 1974 brings us Niall Toybin promoting his one-off Christmas show on Christmas Day, in what seems to be one of the least Christmassy covers ever made for a TV listings magazine in the British Isles. You might have also noticed that for the first time in recorded history, the RTE Guide's Christmas issue is also a Christmas and New Year double issue. Emphasis on recorded history. It could have happened earlier, but I don't know. The Radio Times started having a double issue in 1969, and I don't have evidence for an early one in Ireland, so there. 1975 gave us this chef staring at the void, promoting the RTE adaptation of Aladdin, printed inside a Christmas cracker. Don't know if they're profitable enough in Ireland, though. The cracker not adapting Aladdin. 1976, in the last broadsheet Christmas issue, a heavily hand-painted cover depicting adaptations of Teutonic fairy tales featuring heavily caricatured actors. In 1977, the RTE Guide changed its logo, featuring for the first time in its history a lack of corporate aesthetic, with the logo being the magazine's name in a bluntly utilitarian "So 1977 it hurts" typeface. That year's Christmas cover consisted of 3 people staring at a lonely candle, probably because of the oil crisis, or perhaps because this was going to be their last year with just one channel. Just one. This was clearly evidenced in 1978's Christmas cover, with Santa glued to the radio because the bags were given to the television. RT2 started about a month before this cover went out. Santa's experiment of being in the cover doing something secondary, or primary depending on who you ask, proved successful enough that he appeared in the 1979 Christmas cover, featuring carolers who, when viewed out of context, look like they're laughing at you for being an ass, and Santa himself reading the exact same magazine, which had a miniature of the cover, with him reading the magazine, you know what I mean, 12 years before the Radio Times did that. Magazineception. Radio and Hot Chocolate reduced second place in this cover. 1980 saw a return to the photo covers because this is Ireland and the resources are less. This year's star was an adaptation of Cinderella. RTE was probably low on its magazine budget, so much they thought, hey, photos are appealing, so they kept on repeating it. This is what they did in 1981. I don't know what twink is, but still it seems that the magazine gave undue prominence to musicals and pantomimes in those days. 1982 gave us Joy to the World Christmas special, featuring Irish counterfeit to Ronnie's. In September 1983, the RTE guide rebranded, placing the entire text within the rounded rectangle. And that year's Christmas, the RTE staff, aka Joe Lynch, Twink, who appeared in the cover 2 years earlier, Bosco, Dermot Morgan, and Ruth Buchanan, one of them receiving a shinty puck because Ireland. Yeah, shinty, or hurling? Oh wait, shinty? Hurling? Yeah, I think it's hurling. 1984 didn't bring a total Orwellian dictatorship, at least not in Ireland, but instead gave us probably the most vaporwavy cover, thanks to the neon-lighted Christmas on RTE sign. Great to see that the corporation is trying to find a balance between artwork and photography. 1985 saw Father Vincent Stack dressed up as Santa for the cover. You might have noticed that the logo got pink, but that's okay. Although red was the primary color of the rectangle, other versions of it in blue, orange, even pink, like this cover, were used by the magazine over the 7.5-year lifespan of this logo alone. All this was done using a cheaper Irish version of Colour Wheel Roulette. 1986 saw a comeback of sorts for the 1984 cover aesthetic. This time highlights for that Christmas came out for Givebox. 1987's photo cover consisted of carol singers, and yes, get used to them, photo covers are and always were the cheapest option. 1988 gave us the return of a TV face-dressed Santa, Derek Davis this time, holding a ridiculously tiny glass of wine. And 1989 gave us the idea that Scrooge was going to love the magazine, or the season. The last Christmas cover before deregulation consisted of more carolers with another lonely candle. Just like 1977's cover, it was the last before a major television-related breakthrough in Irish TV history. That year's cover was the last to have one channel's listings. 13 years later, Deregulation. Have you forgotten how good it tastes? In March 1991, the British TV listings magazines were still two. Kinda. The Radio Times for the BBC and the TV Times for ITV and Channel 4. Rupert Murdoch, pissed at the idea that even the TV Times weren't accepting their channels, created his own ephemerous TV listings magazine, TV Guide, which I assume had no ties to the American publication, of which Murdoch worked in practically the entire 90s. And then we have the RTE Guide, still stuck in a league of its own. In March of that year, the floodgates opened and Murdoch's publication was condemned to merge with a satellite publication. The Radio Times started accepting everybody else's, so did the TV Times. And in the UK alone, piles upon piles of TV listings magazines started popping up. For the RTE Guide, it didn't occur to them until April 1991, since, traditionally speaking, the RTE were the only game in town. The only logical solution was to add the Northern Ireland terrestrial channels and their Welsh counterparts because of overspill, even on cable, and even some Sky channels too. Remember that the British channels were already attractive for people who already had cable. The Irish colloquially referred to those channels pre-Sky back in the 1980s as the channels. The new RTE Guide proclaimed itself as the all-channel RTE Guide, and the logo got all new livery, featuring a wordmark in a now more 90s fashion derived from the rising fast food and consuming society that was already accelerating by then. The effects of deregulation effectively caused a switch in the magazine's profile from becoming strictly a TV magazine to a lifestyle one. even though in the monopoly-ish days of the guide, they even included utilitarian lifestyle guides in it. And since it's deregulation, if you were one of the 2 lucky people, you can win a new Opel Astra. This already around throughout the 90s and early 2000s. 1992. Oh look, it's old reliable Gabo again. Holding a bunch of gift boxes and wearing an ugly sweater. Like that one Polish guy who ran for mayor of Białystok once in 2006. Oh look, it's Pat Kenny for 1993. Because I'm sick and tired of seeing Gay Byrne appear in 2 consecutive covers the same way Ireland won 3 Eurovisions in a row that same decade. Eerily enough, Kenny would of course later take role on The Late Late when Gabo finally retired. By that logic, Ryan Tuberty should have been on 1994's cover. He did already work at RTE, but instead was another one of those Christmas party covers that the magazine always felt like doing. You might have noticed, and take a shot of vodka every time I say you might have noticed, that for the past couple of years the magazine initiated a new tradition. A generic greeting written at diagonal. The opals on offer are now mixed, one Astra and one Corsa. Let joy be unconfined, and as a supplement for Christmas films. Unlike the Radio Times, they didn't brag about the sheer volume of movies available. Yet. Partly because at this stage the RTE guide offered listings for a narrow section of channels. In September of 1995, the current RTE logo arose, although it didn't appear in the magazine for another 3 years. Christmas saw the gazillionth photo shoot for the RTE guide. Judging by the mere appearance of this photo in one of the pages, I assume they are the characters of Glenroe. And if you care, they traded the Astra for the Vectra. 1996. We didn't have Boyzone in Portugal. I think we heard of them, but they were eclipsed by the Backstreet Boys and the like. So I needed Apple Mask to explain to me that this is Ronan Keating and the late Stephen Gately from what was then Ireland's biggest musical act. Apparently I didn't miss anything. At least they were finally starting to pander towards the younger generation, the younger demographics, watching Network 2, as opposed to the elderly watching RTE 1. Vectras got upgraded to a Vectra Estate. And for 1997, the last year under the old logo, which was starting to feel tacky and outdated by then, it was a Den takeover starring Dustin the Turkey as the cover star. Yes, it's been around that long. Opal sweepstakes up to 3 this time. 1998, if I recall correctly, in that Facebook page was in September, saw the corporation rebranding the magazine yet again, keeping the more yellow and less red aesthetic, and adopting a wordmark that looks more like a sign of the then impending new millennium. Also, for the first time in 21 years, it's the RTE corporate logo doing its rounds again. I can't believe it's Gay Byrne again! For like the 5th time in this video. Although this time, it has some symbolic meaning, as that Christmas saw his last Christmas edition of The Late Late Show, eyeing his retirement in May 1999. Opal's on offer down to 2, and I'm going to stop bragging about it. 1999 saw the end of the world, so much so that the Friday date led to the magazine's listings stopping on December the 31st, assuming many people thought it was going to be the apocalypse, as TV Go Home was supposed to put it. This time featuring the same puppet from the 1997 cover being strangled by the puppet from the 1993 cover. Oh well, life goes on in 2000, and went on for the RTE Guide too, now featuring the tagline, Ireland's largest selling magazine. The greeting had been changed to Happy Christmas, appearing in a harrowing fashion, spread from one side to the other of the magazine. Oh look, it's Boyzone again. Take a shot of vodka every time I say, oh look. Which is to say they just become unavoidably puffy in middle age, and Westlife had taken their place. The star of 2001's Christmas cover was the young gay Irishman, Brian Dowling, who won the second edition of the British Big Brother that same year and pursued a television career in the UK in the coming decade. Nice guy, wouldn't want to be trapped in an elevator with him, though. 2002 saw the introduction of the magazine's current logo. Now, this is where things start dumbing down. 2002's cover was starting to feel like every other cover of the year. Banal highlights and a photo shoot that seems to lack a gift box. I almost forgot that the past couple of years, 2001 and 2002 specifically, saw the introduction of "let's give our readers notice of the sheer volume of films over the 2 weeks because the Radio Times are doing that for a few years now." And trying to sound Scottish here. The 2003 Christmas cover saw a return to form, this time featuring celebrities from all of the main television broadcasters. There was also this ad bragging about how big it is. Glad to see that the RTE doesn't call the Christmas issue of the guide legendary, as the official slogan is "Christmas begins with the RTE guide," and that's when they started using that. The best I was able to find of the 2004 cover was for a display stand from September 2005. Same old photo shoot, same old win an Opel car. Mind you, soon the Opel cars were no longer being offered because who needs them? On the other side of the border, they're actually sold by Vauxhall, so you know what I mean. 2005 gave us financial advisor Eddie Hobbs, hot off the heels of Rip-Off Republic, the show he hosted, and the omnipotent Ryan Tuberty and Anna Nolan. Oh, and Podge and Rod for some mad reason. Unfortunately, Hobbs got into hot water for comparing current world events with Europe in the 1930s and 40s, such are the dangers of social media platforms in this day and age at the time of recording, and to think he was only 10 years early. In 2006, again, just a photo shoot. For 2007, thanks to Press Reader for giving us the cover, it's not a photo shoot of RTE, totally made up. Unfortunately, the magazine started emulating the Radio Times and calling the Christmas and New Year double issue legendary. 2008's cover was probably the first in history to feature a fold, featuring celebrities that had missed out on the main plays. And for the first time in 29 years, someone is reading the exact same cover, that has a replica of the cover, that has that man reading the cover. You see what I mean? The Radio Times already did that for the first time in 1991, so the RTE guide can take the cake. Don't have the 2009 cover available online, so it's back to the drawing board, and by that I mean photo shooters, whatever celebrities at the time are engaged in childish activities. Christmas 2010 gave us a bunch of people, including Pat Short, stuck inside the most generic wintry landscape imaginable. Also, can you please stop calling it legendary? 2011 involved yet another arse-minded photo shoot, starring celebrities desperately competing for top place at the Best Santa Impersonation competition. Perhaps unsurprisingly, it featured an increasingly ruddy-cheeked Pat Short. 2012 was supposed to be the year of the apocalypse, again, but in the event it coincided with Christmas and ended up ruining everybody's cheers, so Christmas it was, yet another one of those dreary photo shoots appeared. This one came with a bunch of supplements that fell off for no particular reason, most of them related to Christmas eating. It was also best known for a blunder that called the Queen's speech on BBC One as a lecture. 2013's cover was a return to celebrities and winterscapes, and the only thing worth saving is the gold-adorned RT logo. 2014. Stop. Just stop. And for like the umpteenth millionth time, Pat Short is in it. I believe he wants to outnumber Gay Byrne in number of appearances in the Christmas RTE guide. Mind you, by then, Gable was already retired for around 15 years. A visit from the Princess Cruiser in person came in 2015, and the age of photo covers featuring photo shoots and chroma keys were sent over to the dustbin. By then it was a return to form, with Niall O'Loughlin making the cover, inspired by Miss Brown's Boys, including Jennifer Maguire dressed up in time for a sexual party, Mario Rosenstock trying to captivate Miriam O'Callaghan's boobs, and Brian Dobson with a Santa hat on. You just know that Christmas is condemned when you see the news on the front of the guide. Mind you, this Christmas cover won an award at the Irish Magazine Awards 2016 for Best Cover. Speaking of 2016, that year gave us a Dickensian Christmas cover, again featuring caricatured celebrities playing the roles. And yes, Pat Short had to be in it. Even when Pat Short dies, grinning, plastinated cadaver will still be on the RTE guide Christmas cover. 2017 gave us another wintry scene featuring Lucy Kennedy, Des Carroll, even some British people like Jamie Oliver. Unsurprised, Pat Short isn't in it, despite it being his 50th birthday. And in order to stop the over-reliance on Pat Short and realizing that celebrities were giving them a headache, 2018 was back to square one. After so many consecutive years featuring Irish celebrities, from Dustin to Gay Byrne, from Boyzone to Pat Short, and the frozen food section at Tesco next to the fish fingers in 6 of the 7 continents, the RTE guide gave us a special fold and a first of a new saga, the Christmas story aimed mainly at children, this year being one about a family who can't sleep because they can't see Santa, and that Santa can't see anyone when they're awake. 2019 was a hard year for the magazine, as during the spring and summer there were talks of selling it, but unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, hopefully the latter, they stalled. The magazine was saved from total waltz on TV-fication, and for the second year in a row gave us another childish story, this time A Christmas in the Woods starring anthropomorphic animals. This is the sort of illustration that you would see on RTE Junior if they had the guts to make an animated feature. Lastly, we have 2020, the year where Craven Thorne, Dead Atlantis, and so on unleashed their destructive power around the world. For the second year in a row, the cover was illustrated by the longtime Brazilian immigrant Tarsila Cruz, who has been living in Ireland since 2007. This time the cover depicts anthropomorphic rabbits who can't see their grandparents in person due to Craven Thorne inspecting the outside world and including the animal kingdom and effectively killing off many in the process. Despite the apocalypse, which I hope subsumes any time soon, this edition alone was the most circulated and most bought in recent history. More than 270,000 of the bloody things were sold. If each copy was a person, then that would be roughly the equivalent of the population of New Caledonia. Now, its success raises a number of questions about its future. In the first world, i.e. countries like the UK, France, Germany, Italy, USA, etc., linear TV is depending on the country, dying, or dead, and who needs listings magazines? When actually you have the internet and EPGs on our television sets, and decoders if you have subscription television. Even in more impoverished countries, even in more impoverished countries in terms of terrestrial television, where it is minuscule, our DTT network here in Portugal with its 7 channels, and their Sairview in Ireland with about 10 channels, and nothing compared to the massive Freeview. And God knows how many Irish people have joined streaming.
It may not even survive in print to the end of the decade.
When Apple Musk finished the 2011 Christmas wrapping video about the Radio Times, he claimed,
It may not even survive in print to the end of the decade.
Somehow the radio and the TV Times would actually survive. Even the smaller publications were condemned to talk about streaming as well, continuing with their tradition of garish fonts and baity titles, you know what I mean. Hopefully the TV listings landscape in the UK will soon be limited as they were back in the day to just the radio and the TV Times. Certainly the TV Times will fall and the Radio Times will become a monopoly. And it came to pass that this video premiered on the 1st of December 2021, the exact date of the 60th anniversary of the RTV Guide's first issue. And as of the time of recording and hopefully premiering, the 2001 Christmas cover hasn't even been dropped and is mere days away from appearing. Hopefully I'm lobbying Apple Musk to include the RTE guide just to offset the radio times, because, come on, just stop calling it legendary. The RTE guide has the privilege of not being self-titled as legendary for too long. In the past few years, they seem to have favored the Christmas Begins with the RTE guide tagline more than the actual concept of being legendary. But for many people, it's the only RTE guide they buy. So, apparently, God knows what future will bring the RTE guide. The magazine will enter the new year in the auspices of the Dead Atlantis Overlord, unless we're free from that next year. Will still run by RTE, who has a publications division that also publishes a few other magazines under the RTE Guide umbrella name, i.e. cookery magazines and such. Ireland is smaller than the UK in terms of population, human resources and money. For a country with close to 5 million, you won't expect RTE to be powerful in the magazine and publishing sector. You wouldn't expect them to have about 20 magazines, whereas the BBC had all that money and the commercial arm wider than RTE's to handle that. And the corporation is still at the mercy of the RTE guide. If it was sold, then its name will make 0 sense. Just wait until the inevitable happens soon, and the RTE guide will probably collapse or cut its size. Whatever comes first. Oh well. Leishadley, or whatever they pronounce it, Mike Gellick is shonky.